All right, I'm laughing. This is Dr. Andy Yates on the In Congress channel with Thoughts in Congress, which is just kind of, I feel I need to speak out about certain things just because I want to vent my feelings, if you like, or explain something. I'm laughing because I live in suburbia. It's a lovely place to live in Northamptonshire, but it's noisy. I've got my neighbours, they're bless them. I like my neighbours, all my neighbours. You know, the dog walks outside, you can hear them walking across the floor. Then my neighbour's kids playing in the garden. I'm like, oh, then I got to shut the door and ban the dogs to go outside. But it won't be for long because none of these videos are going to be longer than 20 minutes. So let's go. Going to talk about energy and Black Lives Matter movement and some other stuff. All right, just that builds upon that. I used to live in the United States, in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was privileged to be able to go and see Dr. Deepak Chopra at a big auditorium, right? 1,000-seater or something like this. And he did his usual thing, and he went through a list of, say, 7 items and said, these are the 7 things you need to do to get ascendance or enlightenment or whatever. So kind of cool. But one term he used that really stuck in my mind was that of critical mass. And you may know critical mass is, I think, the lowest amount of mass that's necessary for a spontaneous and continuous reaction. So you get, at the molecular level, one little reaction causes 2, which cause 4, which cause 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, blah, 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 blah. That's how you get a nuclear explosion. You could relate it to our dear friend, the R rate in this country. Whereby the R is, if there is an R rate of 1, it stays the same. If there is an R rate of 2, one person will give it to 2, they will give it to 4, they will give it to 8. You get the idea. Okay. And I thought that can be applied in other ways. And this is the way I thought about it. Now, ever since the just dreadful murder of George Floyd, I mean, it was appalling, absolutely appalling. The lack of care for human suffering, it's just almost too much to put into words, isn't it? And that was the flame that lit the fire under the Black Lives Movement to start with. And there is a lot of discrimination and racism in the USA, and there is some in the UK too, quite a lot. So it's a just movement. Moving forward, it's good. That's what should happen. And what it should do at its outcome is create change. And that's the key. So now, the movement grew and grew and grew. And then what people realized was that a lot of the black people were at a disadvantage. They were poor. They were struggling to survive and this kind of thing. And other people said, well, I'm not black, but that's true for me too. There's something bigger here. It's not just the black lives. It's also the rest of us. That the system is creating a system that is unfair, right? That we are ending up in this, the haves and the have-nots, right? The upper classes, the lower classes, the rich, the poor, working class, and so on. And in a democracy, the democratic mass are supposed to be the ones who control things, the ones not necessarily control, but they're the ones who decide what should happen. But that's been turned on its head somehow. But talking about the Black Lives Movement, what we were seeing basically was a wave building up. And as more and more people added to it, and there were protests all around the world, especially in the US, especially in the UK, because that's what I got to see, you ended up with this wave getting higher and higher and higher and higher. And it became a tsunami. This massive wave with lots of energy pushing forward, you know, I think a critical mass that would make change, right? But what happened? Has there been any change? Not really. I know in the UK, it was identified that COVID-19 was having more effect on what they call the BAME community, the Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic community. Nothing's been done. Nothing's changed. Why is that? If we know that, you know, the BAME community is affected more, if we know that black community is affected more, why has nothing changed? Because the energy was not applied. So you've got this wave, right? This wave going up like this. And then what happens? I think two things happen. One is, I think it gets diluted and dispersed. And the other is, I think it gets resisted. So let's look at the first thing. So we've got this big wave coming along like this, and it breaks on a bunch of statues. And I got to say, who would want a statue of a slaver in their city? This was in Bristol, right? The one, Colston, something like that, Colston, the one that they pulled down. And fair enough. The people have been trying to get that thing down for a long time, which says that there was a section who were in power who didn't want it to come down. There's the key, right? The powerful people didn't want it to come down. The masses, who are supposed to be the drivers in the democracy, wanted it to come down, but it stayed up. You've got the same thing in Oxford University, of the statue of Cecil Rhodes. Rhodes was an infamous eugenicist, but what he did was he had so much money. I think he was the founder and owner of the De Beers Diamond Company, and he gave the Cecil Rhodes Trust and Scholarship to Oxford University. And I'll just say as an aside that pretty much everybody that you'll see in senior government right now in the UK is from where? Oxford University, of course. Right, just saying. Anyway, but the statue's still there right now, I think. It hasn't come down yet. They've been asking for it to come down for a long time. Hasn't come down yet, even though the Democratic masses have made it clear they want it to come down. And it should, because that guy was a eugenicist, a white supremacist, all of that. It's still there. So what's happening? So you've got the wave now striking these different things and losing some of its energy in doing that. Instead of being focused on changing what can be changed. Because how do you climb a mountain? You climb it one rock at a time. You don't look at the top of the mountain and say, come on, let's get up there. Unless it's a little tiny mountain. If it's a big mountain, you do it in a series of stages, in a series of steps. You do it a rock at a time. That's the way to make change. And certainly the energy of this tsunami was there. But unfortunately now it's coming down to being a tidal wave. Now, on the other side of things, we see protests, right? Peaceful protests are a powerful democratic force to make change. There's no doubt about that. But when those peaceful protests ends up with rioting and looting, see, that turns people against it. Even people who support the cause are going to be against that, especially when these rioters and looters are so indiscriminate that they destroy their own people's properties, businesses, and so on and so forth. It just seems totally wrong to me that they're missing the mark. And that's the point, the targeting of that energy. So now instead of having a tidal wave, a tsunami, you've got a tidal wave, right? So it's less powerful. Now it is possible, I say possible, that a lot of those rioters, a lot of those looters, a lot of those disaffected ones, the opposition to the protests and stuff like this, are actually paid or told to do that. By who? Well, the people who don't want it to happen. Don't want change, want to maintain the status quo. In the UK, they want to keep shoveling money out of the system and getting it offshore where it doesn't pay taxes. Where the hard work of people in this country that should then a piece of it, the taxes, support this country and cause this country to become stronger, is actually being taken out of this country and put offshore in somebody's so that they can use the money without having to pay that part of the taxes. It's wrong, isn't it? Yes, it is. But how are they able to do that? Well, what we had was a force coming together. It was Black Lives Matter to start with. The core was Black Lives Matter. And then there were other disaffected people coming in. The people in poor situations, the people who are struggling to get by, all gathered together and started to push. And then the opposition started to push back in small ways, just divide and conquer, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. Because if you think about it in history, I mean, that's what's happened. Divide and conquer. That's how there was a time when you had peasants in the fields, you had a castle somewhere and a king with 100 soldiers, and that was the power. He could do what he wanted in a certain area. And then when kings fought kings, they ended up putting the peasants into the battle so they could get rid of them first and maybe win the battle without having to commit themselves or any of their shock troops or their well-provided people with swords and shields and armour, right? So they didn't want to waste that, so they'd send the peasants in. And then when they finished, they said, yeah, we won, let's get the treasure, and then you peasants get back to the fields where you belong. Divide and conquer. So you've got the blacks, you've got the Asians, you've got the whites, you've got the others, you've got Catholics and Protestants and Muslims and Hindus and Rastafarians and whatever. Chop them up in boxes, put them in boxes, and then try to prevent them talking to each other. Try to prevent them building towards some kind of critical mass that will actually make change. I'm talking about that change. That change, that focus needs to be on things that can change, that you are able to change, a rock at a time, a rock at a time, a rock at a time. Going back to my analogy, which is wearing a bit thin now, I suppose, but again, if you see a wave on the shore and it's big in the middle, it tapers down and gets thin on the outside, and the wider it gets, the lower the wave gets. So if you try and change everything, the whole of society, the whole of the system, well, you're probably not going to be able to change anything. But if you focused it in certain areas, now I'm not an expert on this, it's just my thoughts in Congress. That's something I thought. What a shame. Because I'm seeing this going down, and I hope it doesn't. I hope it does make change. I mean, in the UK, we seem locked in this position now. But a lot of people are looking at this and going, what's happening? It's out of control. Or at least it's out of our control. There's nothing we can do about it. And that's pretty scary, considering we are the democratic masses. We are the ones who should deal with this. Can't we stand back at some point and say, I've changed my mind? No, because we have such an awful system of government. The parliamentary system is awful. We have first past the post voting, which is dreadfully unfair and not democratic. The fact is, I think I'm right in saying, that our current government or government party that's in at the moment got less votes than the others added together. Oh, wait a minute. If we're a democracy, because we keep hearing about Brexit, how 52% voted for, 48% for Brexit, 48% voted against Brexit to stay in the European Union, so 50% counts. Well, why doesn't that count when it chooses our government? Weird, isn't it? Part of the system. Has that been created? I think it probably has. Just my personal opinion. But there we are. I mean, that's the situation we're in. We're if only we could focus the critical mass that's developed on things we can change, so they get changed in law, so they become permanent, and not just a feeling, a sentiment, which most of us feel towards supporting these just movements that are going forward, these just ideas of equality. I was watching an ad on the TV the other day, and it was of a black swimmer, English, and she was saying, she's the only black swimmer, and she was saying, people say black people can't swim, that they'll drown, that they sink and everything, whatever, which is nonsense. She swims at a national standard. But she was saying that when she stands on the starting block, she doesn't want to be seen as a black swimmer. She wants to be seen as a good swimmer, a swimmer. And it'd be nice if we all looked at each other as human beings. And I'll probably talk about this later because the time's moving on. Before I go any further, here's a quick advertising break. You may have noticed my t-shirt, perhaps not. You can just do the blue bit. Check this out. What does that mean? Motley Mongrel, well, Becoming a Motley Mongrel is the title of my book. People have read it and said they cried, they've laughed, they've enjoyed it, they've been inspired by it, it's made them go and do further research, they've got them interested in various different things. Check it out. Put Motley Mongrel into Amazon, or Becoming a Motley Mongrel, or my name, Dr. Andy Yates, into Amazon, and then you'll see all my books. And then you'll also see, if you put in Dr. Heather Yates, She Who Must Be Obeyed's book, which is all about reality. Do you create your reality, or does your reality create you? All right, ads finished. So we've got this system, a system that seems to keep us locked within that system. We know it's possible to create a critical mass which is enough to make change. You know, governments and everything were running for cover when all this lot was happening, because they knew there was the power. But there were some who were sitting there going, just let it ride. It'll all go away. It'll lose its impetus. Now, this has been one of the strongest movements that we've ever seen. But it gets chipped away at. Little riots here, little bit of looting here and everywhere like this. Rival protesters coming in like this. The other day, I heard a senior member of Trump's entourage refer to Black Lives Matter as a terrorist group. Now, you must know that putting labels on things like conspiracy theory, terrorist, drug dealer, whatever, thug, putting these labels on things is actually quite a powerful process, because it sticks, and the media loves stuff like that, and they'll put that in their headline, you know, Black Lives Matter terrorists, you know, and it's totally wrong. They're not terrorists at all, because they're part of the democratic mass. People who are terrorists are people who are causing terror in the masses, not the other way around. Anyway, do I have a solution? Nope. I just put out this video and hope it gets people's minds, people who are more able to make changes, or able to keep that energy going and keep it focused on some things that we can change. Because once they've changed, then we can change more. We can create another critical mass within that process of change. You get what I'm saying, right? All right, so this is a bit of an experiment. Thoughts in Congress. Just trying to get things out there, just trying to kind of vent my views, and things happen in the news. So I'll probably be talking about COVID soon. Probably the next one I'll talk about COVID-19. Some of the stuff I know, some of the stuff I've learned. None of this is scientific based. It's all personal opinion, but I think a lot of people might agree with me of some of the sentiments I put into this video here. So please take a listen, look at my books if you want to, look at She Who Must Be Obeyed's book and everything like this, and let's keep fighting towards that cause. So this is Dr. Andy Yates on the In Congress channel. Please take care.